Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining. We're going to give it a couple of moments to let people come into the room, and then we'll get started. We've got a big crowd today, so they're filtering in, everyone's filtering in, and I don't want to get started without people. Okay. So I think we've got just about everybody in. So let's get started. Welcome and thank you for joining us for this overview of the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. We're really excited about this webinar and this fund. I'm Courtney A. Barton, the Program Director for Arts and Culture and Racial Equity Initiatives at the Cleveland Foundation. I'm here to walk you through the context for the Cleveland Black Futures Fund and our considerations for this first round of grant making that we're doing this year. There will be time for me to answer questions, so please be sure to type them in the Q&A box as we go along, and we will take as many as possible at the end of the prepared remarks. My colleague this afternoon, Annalise Chandler-Nieves, will be running these slides and facilitating the Q&A. So I'm going to turn the presentation over to her for a brief moment to get us started.
Hello, everyone. Before we get started with the presentation, we must acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory and homelands of the people, Lenape, Delaware, Shawnee, Wyandotte, Miami, Ottawa, Potawatomi, and other Great Lakes tribes like Chippewa, Kickapoo, Wee, Penobscot, and Kaskaskia. We want to express our gratitude and honor the past and present tribes that reside in the home we now call Northeast Ohio.
Thank you for that, Annalise. I'm just going to start really quickly with something that I'm sure most of us on this webinar already know. I think the fact that the original people from this land, we have to acknowledge them in this way is evidence of this, but systemic racism exists. And it's important for us to say it out loud. It exists. It affects every area of life, every system that we operate within, and every single individual. And we can only begin to repair the effects of systemic racism if we consistently acknowledge that it exists. These images on this slide may be familiar to you, and to me, they represent the longstanding and compounding issues that I know a lot of us in this virtual room are fighting every single day. On the left, we have the redlining map of Cleveland produced by the Federal Homeowners Association in the 1940s. This is the map of where they would not back mortgages, those places that are red. And those decisions led directly to the generational wealth gap that we experience today. And on the right, we have a map that was produced by the Center for Community Solutions that depicts the life expectancy in our region by neighborhood. And the darker shaded areas have shorter life expectancies. And we see the overlap between these maps. The map of shorter life expectancy resembles the map of redlining from the 1940s, and it's evidence that the decisions of decades, if not centuries ago, we're still dealing with those effects to this very day. Next slide, please. On top of that, In the last year, we have been dealing with the devastation of the COVID-19 crisis. It's been overwhelming. I found it personally overwhelming. It's been overwhelming for the community, but it's important for us to not shy away from the particulars in the way that the COVID-19 crisis has devastated the Black community in particular. So these are just a couple of lines from news articles that have run recently. In Cleveland, at least 70% of total COVID-19 cases where race is known affect Black people, significantly out of proportion with our representation in the overall population of the city. Even though Black Ohioans only comprise 14% of the state's population, Black people are 27% of COVID-19 hospitalizations, again, overrepresentation on the basis of race. And this is something that I just read this week. But if Black and Latinx people were dying of COVID-19 at the same rate as white people in this country, 22,000 people would still be alive as of December. So this just goes to show we have a lot to push back against. And of course, also in 2020, we saw the renewed massive uprisings against police brutality in the wake of the deaths of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor and Tony McDade and so much more. And I just share these things because this is the context into which we are launching the Cleveland Black Futures Fund. Next slide, please. The Cleveland Black Futures Fund is a part of the Cleveland Foundation's response to all of the foregoing. We started the Cleveland Black Futures Fund to support Black-led nonprofit organizations that are doing the work of helping us survive and thrive through these crises. Our intention with this fund is to support organizational infrastructure and capacity of Black-led organizations specifically. Now, we will talk a little bit more about what we mean by capacity in this webinar. And the reason why we are supporting Black-led organizations with this fund is because we know that across the country, Black-led organizations receive a vanishing amount of philanthropic grants. And the vast majority of those grants go towards project support. And when you are getting all support for project support, nothing for your capacity, that leaves organizations struggling to survive from project to project. We believe that focusing on supporting capacity and infrastructure is what's going to help organizations to thrive and to be resilient and ready to withstand sudden crises like the COVID-19 crisis. The Cleveland Foundation Board allocated $2.5 million to this fund last year. And I just want to make it clear that this is a starting point. We intend for this fund to be long-term, and we will be going back and asking for more this year and in subsequent years. Next slide, please. I also want to take a moment to thank the donors who have helped to grow this fund in short order, listed here: Facebook, the George W. Codrington Foundation, Giant Eagle Foundation, Health Comp Foundation, St. Luke's Foundation, Troy Mart Fund, and many generous individual donors across our community. I believe these contributions express a sincere desire to support the Black community specifically, and faith in the visions of Black community leaders to change the circumstances that we have been struggling against for many years. And I know that that vision exists in this room right now. And I just want to say that I look forward the next time we do this webinar to updating this presentation with a slide to shout out all of the grantees from this first round of funding. Next slide, please. The Cleveland Black Futures Fund is a committee-advised fund of the Cleveland Foundation. This means that the Cleveland Foundation Board of Directors approves the grants, as they do with the vast majority of grants outside of donor-advised funds. But for this fund in particular, we wanted to create a committee to keep us accountable for our knowledge and service to the community specifically. So this is our list of committee members. I won't read all of the names to you. They are on our website, they are in this slide, but I just want you all to know that outside of where any members of this committee work presently, they come from a wide breadth of professional backgrounds and a great depth of knowledge in various sectors. Most have very long histories working in nonprofit organizations specifically. We have professionals with backgrounds in health, the environment, sustainability, youth development, community development, education, and the arts. Because we believe that work in all of these areas and much, much more will be important for this fund to support. So let me reiterate, this fund is open to organizations working across issue areas. Next slide, please. So we're going to get into the nitty gritty of how to apply for this fund. First, and I just want to reiterate and make it clear, this fund is looking to support organizations that have Black chief executive or executive director leadership, however you call that person, who probably sits at the top of an organization chart. If you have one of those, we are looking to see that that person is Black. And the reason for that is very simple. We know that the race of the executive leadership of an organization is directly correlated to the number of grant opportunities that organizations receive across the country. It's just the way that it has been. So we are seeking to be intentional about undoing that disparity and putting resources at the disposal of organizations that are led by Black people. If you are not a Black organization leader and you are doing work that fits into the goals of this fund, we invite you to investigate other grant making pathways at the Cleveland Foundation. And while we are at it, I want to make it clear that if you are a Black leader and you are interested in applying for the Cleveland Black Futures Fund, this might not be the only opportunity that you are qualified for at the Cleveland Foundation. So we also invite you to investigate other grant making opportunities at the Cleveland Foundation. For instance, the Minority Arts and Education Fund may be of interest to you. Our next point on this slide, because we are just getting started with this fund, because we are trying to plan, because we have no idea what the request volume is going to be at this moment, we are going to be making single year grants at this time. That might change in the future, but we need to gather as much information as possible so that we can plan appropriately. I want to make it clear that this is just the first round of grant making this year. There will be another round of grant making that will be announced later in 2021. So after this webinar, if you decide that you need more time to get your plans in order, feel free to come back in the next round that will be announced subsequently. And we will look at the timeline for grant making for this year later in the presentation. Applications will be accepted online only. I will walk you through what the application process will look like in this webinar. And I know that we have received questions about the range and size of grants that we are probably going to make. So we are looking probably at the range of $25,000 to $100,000, which can definitely represent a very sizable capacity investment for most nonprofit organizations. As you're listening to this, if you have a compelling reason why you think that you would want to seek a grant between the amounts of, say, $100,000 and $200,000, I would invite you to contact us at the email address on the screen, Cleveland Black Futures Fund at clevefdn.org, to let us know your thoughts and plans. Again, because this is our first round of grant making, we've got a lot of planning that we need to sort through, and that will be very helpful to us. Next slide, please. All right, so organizational capacity. I know that terms like organizational capacity can kind of descend into nonprofit jargon, so let's make it really clear. Basically, you can think of organizational capacity as the day-to-day activities or planning for such activities and strategizing for such activities that is necessary to make an organization run optimally, to run really well. The request for proposals on our website contains links to this candid.org quote that we have on this slide about helping organizations to be focused, efficient, and productive. It also has a link to the free management library pages mentioned on this slide. And these are just a few examples of organizational capacity. When we're thinking about that, we're thinking about board development. We're thinking about fundraising and fundraising planning. It might be fiscal oversight. It might be HR. As you are preparing your proposal, think about the things that your organization needs to take care of that enable you to take care of your core and mission aligned activities. Maybe you need a fundraising consultant. Maybe you need board training. Maybe you need some accounting help. Maybe you need to hire a person to be able to handle any of these activities. Perhaps you're an all-volunteer organization right now, and you want to become a staffed and full-time organization, and you need someone to write the business plan to get you there, or you need to pay somebody who's going to wake up and think about these issues and deal with them on a regular basis to help you get from point A in your development as an organization to point B. This is your opportunity to apply for that kind of work specifically. Next slide, please. All right. So with just a little background on what organizational capacity is, and again, I will invite you when these slides become public or to look at the RFP on the Cleveland Foundation website to visit those links and see more information about organizational capacity. Let's talk about the actual application process. If you are new to Cleveland Foundation grant-making processes, you'll go to the Cleveland Foundation website, and on the top navigation bar, you'll click on grants and programs, excuse me, and you'll scroll down and you will click on apply for a grant, which is circled in yellow on this slide. Next slide, please. That's going to take you to a page that resembles this one. It's got several numbered boxes on it. You're going to scroll down to the area with boxes 2 and 3, and here you have a decision point. If you have never applied for a Cleveland Foundation grant before, you're going to start at box 2, requesting a login. If you are interested in applying, you need to be a 501c3 organization. And if you don't have login credentials, you will click this link, you will enter your 501c3 information, and you will be granted login credentials. Since we can only make grants to 501c3 organizations, this is a step that enables us to make sure that organizations do have a current 501c3 and are therefore qualified to receive grants from the Cleveland Foundation. Even if you decide that you want to apply for a grant in a subsequent round of grant making, go ahead and apply for your login credentials if you don't have them early, or if you need to reset them, do that early so that that doesn't become a time limiting factor for you. If you have credentials, or once you get credentials, box number 3 is your spot. You will click on apply for grants, grants login at that point. And when you click here, if we can go to the next slide, please. You will be taken to this page, and this is where you can log in. So you get your credentials, you log in here. Next slide, please. And you will be taken into the portal, our Grants Gateway homepage. There will be several different grant applications listed on this page, so please make sure that you are utilizing the Cleveland Black Futures Fund CBFF grant application. It is a different application than some of the other grant applications that are on this page, and this just makes sure that your grant application gets into the right queue. We have designed a specific application process for this grant fund because we want to make sure that we elicit the same types of organization information from every single applicant. So let's consider what these questions are and what that process will look like specifically. Next slide, please. All right. If you have applied for a Cleveland Foundation grant before in the past, you will note that this application has more questions than other grant applications. But I want to stress and be very, very clear, we don't necessarily want you to write more. But because our Cleveland Foundation grants are reviewed on a rolling basis, and this is a time-limited request for proposals, we want to make sure that we get every single question that we need to answer answered up front, so that we get the answers and we don't have to make calls. We only have so much capacity to get answers in on time. So we're asking more questions, not necessarily for more information. We're asking for pointed answers. And in order to hold everybody to that, most of the questions will have word limits of about 250 words just to keep answers brief. There are 2 questions that will not have a word limit and you can go into more depth, but that's just to make it very, very clear. It's not a trick question, and we don't want you to write a book for any of these answers. If your answer is a few straightforward sentences to any one of these questions, feel free to keep it very, very brief. Because I was an English and a creative writing student, these questions are organized around the 5 W's and the H, just to make it logical and consistent. They're who questions, what questions, where questions, when, why, and how questions. And if you can answer all of those questions, you will have a very thorough grant application. So let's take a look at these questions, and I will read these to you. Who does your organization serve? And this can include neighborhoods, age groups, communities that are specified in other identifiers. So say you are an organization that serves 50 girls in East Cleveland between the ages of 10 and 13. That is a complete answer to this question. You don't need to put anything else there. Where does your organization operate? You can specify neighborhoods here. If you have various programming sites, if you have buildings and offices, do you own or lease your space, or is it being provided in kind? That helps us to understand a lot about where the work will be taking place. Are your organization staff full-time or part-time? Are they paid or volunteer? When does your organization's typical programming or work take place? So let's take our example organization of East Cleveland organization that is serving 50 girls between the ages of 10 and 13. Perhaps your programming takes place on weekday afternoons and every other Saturday. This is the type of information that we would be looking for in that question. What are your guiding values? So maybe you want to help girls become bold and interested in STEM, something of that. Maybe you are interested in non-traditional opportunities. Maybe your values are something else entirely, but just what is making your work tick? And what are your organization's greatest strengths and challenges at this time? Maybe you've had instability in your programming sites, and that is a challenge for you. But perhaps you've had the same girls for a number of years and you've developed really deep relationships with them. That's the type of thing that you could put in these questions. Next slide, please. So this question is the long question, and that is the question where you have unlimited space to answer the questions. It doesn't have to be long, but you have more space. Please describe the activities that you would undertake with grant funding in as much detail as necessary. How would these activities strengthen your organization's capacity? For examples of what constitutes organizational capacity, please see the request for proposals. Again, those links to candid.org and the Free Management Library. Why is this work urgent right now? And what outcomes do you hope to achieve? This is the meat of why you are asking for a grant at this time. And perhaps what you would want to say in the example of our sample organization is that because you've had instability in your programming sites, you need to sign a lease in order to make sure that the girls have someplace to go all the time. And because of that, you also need a site coordinator to make sure to turn on the lights and lock the doors at the end of the day. And that's where you would explain what that is. If awarded a grant, when would your organization begin proposed activities? Back to our sample organization that I'm completely making up on the fly, but perhaps you think it's going to take you 2 months in order to evaluate spaces and sign a lease, and then you're going to sign a 1-year lease. That's your timeline. Please describe any partnerships that are important to your work. Perhaps you have partnerships with local churches or schools that help you to recruit girls for your program. You'd put that in there. Based on your experience, please explain how COVID-19 has affected the community you serve and your organization. And this is because we really need to understand, it's helpful for us to understand how organizations are growing and adapting. And one of the things that I'm learning every single day is that organizations are going outside of their mission statements and their usual work in order to help people and communities survive this crisis. Organizations are dropping off food and baby formula and diapers, and that's completely outside of their usual work as, say, an arts organization. You can explain that here. Perhaps you need to provide masks, or perhaps you are doing calls and drive-bys to check on people. You can put that information there. Next slide, please. This question is one for imagination, but it helps us to understand a little bit more about your vision and what it is that you're trying to do in the world. So if you could look into the future 5 to 10 years, what would you want news headlines and stories to say about your organization and the work you have accomplished? Going back to our sample organization, maybe it is something about what you hope the girls will end up achieving, or maybe it is you've expanded to, X number of sites. It could be anything. It could be completely imaginative, but I think radical imagination is what's getting us all through these crises. So go ahead and feel free to be creative here. And the last question, and this is really open. You have, I think, a bit more space in this question. Please tell us anything else you believe we should know to evaluate your proposal well. I don't think that we're probably asking all of the questions. And one of the things that I think happens often is that people don't know the magic that they hold in the work that they do. So think about it. Think about something that makes your organization really unique, or anything else that we didn't ask you about. Feel free to put it there. Next slide, please. So now that we have looked at the questions, let's take a moment to look at the budget, because this is going to be really important for us. And I think budgeting, especially for some organizations, if you don't have a financial background, if you are primarily a volunteer organization and this is your first time at budgeting, this can be a little bit intimidating. Again, this is a place where you need to use some imagination. So we provide an Excel form for budgets. I'm really asking, especially for your request, that you use the Excel budget, because that helps us on the back end with our system, as opposed to using another budget. The budget form asks for both income and for expenses. So this is the top of the Excel form, and this is where you're putting in your project income. I will note that for this request, it is not necessary for you to have other sources of funding for this capacity request. But if you do, you can let us know under either anticipated and committed whether or not you do have other sources of funding for this request. You can also list in-kind donations or donated goods or services that could help with this request. When it comes to funding a request, we do understand that maybe you are sending out proposals and you're not sure. You're not sure if you're going to get that money. You can put speculative amounts or amounts that you have asked for in grant proposals under perhaps anticipated. And you can give us a little note in the description box that says, you're waiting to hear back. That's fine. It just helps us to know where you are in the fundraising process, or if you've had an opportunity to begin fundraising yet at all. If you haven't, it's not a knock against you. It's just helpful for us to know. Next slide, please. This is the bottom of that Excel document. And this is where you're going to tell us what these activities will cost and how you will spend the Cleveland Foundation grant and perhaps other funding if you happen to be getting it. I want to make it really, really clear. We want you to use every single line item as needed. So let's say that you want to hire a development staff person to help you secure other grants and other sources of funding. Will that person need a computer? If they will, you should list a new computer in the equipment line. Presumably, if this person is a full-time staff person, that person will require benefits. So make sure you include benefits in your calculation. If that person is going to need pens and notebooks, budget for that. Put it in there under supplies and materials. To make it perfectly clear, I can't guarantee that we can fully fund any grant request. I can't guarantee that we can fund every single proposal that we get. But it is really important for us to have a complete picture of what it takes for you to do the work that you need to do. The bottom of this form mentions capital expenses, including land acquisition and building costs. If you are interested in something that would be a capital expense along those lines, construction, renovation, et cetera, I'm going to ask you to email us as well. This pandemic has been a really perilous time for capital projects in nonprofit communities. And I know space is really important. So let's talk about what your needs are before you submit a proposal for that. Next slide, please. All right. So I just want to reiterate a couple of points, and we'll look at the timeline, and then we'll start taking questions. So hints and tips. Again, answer all the questions thoroughly, but they don't have to be long. Most boxes will have a word limit of 250 words. We cannot review proposals ahead of time, but if you do have specific questions, if you want to talk, please be sure to sign up for virtual office hours so that we can have an opportunity to run through some of your questions. Some people already have, and I look forward to speaking with you in the next couple of weeks. If not, the link is on this slide. It's also on our website and in the RFP, so feel free to sign up. Applicants must hold 501c3 status or be fiscally sponsored by a 501c3 organization. To be perfectly frank, applying for a 501c3 might be the capacity need that you want to apply for. Maybe you've been doing this work on an informal basis and you want to formalize your organization as an IRS registered nonprofit. You can do that. This is an opportunity to do that. You just need to make sure that you have a fiscal agent that already holds a 501c3 that is able to apply on your behalf. We can't help to connect you to 501c3 organizations, but we have supported fiscal agency type arrangements in other grant making opportunities. It is welcome here. And again, use all the line items in your budget so that we get a complete sense of the cost of the project. Next slide, please. So the timeline. The online application opened on January 25th. We are here at the webinar on the 28th right now. Virtual office hours are open for scheduling the first 2 weeks of February. On February 11th, we will be hosting a virtual town hall. Radio 1 Cleveland is partnering with us on that. We are so excited to give more information about this grant making opportunity, an opportunity to hear from the committee, which was not on this call today. So please tune in, more information will come out about that. The deadline for applications will be February 26th. It's a short period. I would say, if you are really worried about meeting the application deadline, you want to talk right now, you want to get some questions answered, and you want to apply in a subsequent round, that's fine. I do understand that sometimes you need to cogitate on the information, you need to think about it before you're ready to submit a proposal. We intend to inform applicants by the end of March, so we're giving ourselves a really tight turnaround. So that's why it's important for you to make sure that you answer all the questions as thoroughly as possible. If you have questions about anything here, for instance, about the RFP itself or qualifications, that sort of thing, please contact Cleveland Black Futures Fund at clevefdn.org. If you have a question specifically about how to access the portal, or if you're having trouble submitting, that sort of question should be directed to grants management at clevefdn.org. They do a Herculean job of making sure that everybody who needs access to the portal gets that access, and I don't have access to that sort of information in the portal. So with that, next slide, please. I think we're ready to take questions, and Annalise will be helping to moderate that.
Okay, so to begin, we have a question of Courtney. Can you speak to why this fund is specifically for Black-led and Black-serving organizations? Does this mean other demographics are being left behind?
That's a great question. Thank you so much. The reason why this fund is for Black-led organizations specifically is because we believe that the people closest to the issue are closest to the problem. We're talking about the Black community specifically. Therefore, we are looking at Black-led organizations specifically. And as we have mentioned, Black organization leaders, by the data, get less nonprofit funding, grant funding, than other organization leaders. So one, we're responding to that. We're trying to be intentional about providing opportunities to Black-led organizations, specifically because there is a problem specifically in getting grants to Black-led organizations. The other thing is that what this shouldn't be construed as is a means to conflate the issues of all communities of color as being exactly the same. There are lots of ways in which organizations or issues facing communities of color are interrelated, are interconnected, but we don't want to conflate and flatten these issues. Frankly, what needs to happen is that we need to support Latinx organizations in working on Latinx issues and Asian organizations in working on Asian issues. And these are things that we are working on at the foundation. So I hope you will continue to rock with us on this journey as we roll out more things specifically for more communities. But in the spirit of intersectionality, I would also share that in putting together the funds for this, or the plans for this fund, excuse me, we were really inspired by the Combahee River Collective statement. The Combahee River Collective was a collective of Black women, lesbian scholars and activists in the 1970s. And their statement includes a line that I find really beautiful and inspirational that says that if Black women are free, everybody else by default must be free. Because for Black women to be free, every system of oppression would have to be dismantled. And if you take it further, because this was a collective of queer women, if queer Black women or trans Black women are free, then everybody else has to be free, because all of those systems that hold these women down have to be dismantled. And so then everybody benefits. So no, other demographics aren't left behind. We know that Black leaders are making strides in every single issue area on behalf of both Black communities and literally everybody else. And we also hope, again, that you will stay with us for more initiatives that we are rolling out the Cleveland Foundation that will be specific and intentional about racial justice.
Um, so another question is, can one ask for funds to help purchase a building?
I'm going to ask again, that's a capital expense. So please, please, please email us if you are interested specifically in capital expenses, such as building purchase.
Next question is, to clarify, does this mean if you are CEO or president is not a person of color, Black, the organization is not eligible to apply for this funding? And just a follow-up is, even though the majority of those organizations serve Black or people of color?
Yes, that is what that means. Again, the disparity does absolutely, by the data, fall down to the race of the organization's executive director. It's unfortunate, but philanthropy historically and across this country has not funded Black leaders to work on issues within Black communities. And we want to be intentional about that. But if you are doing work, we do invite you to investigate other grant making opportunities at the Cleveland Foundation.
Are social entrepreneur business owners allowed to apply? They are not a nonprofit.
So I think that is a case by case. I mean, as a grant making foundation, we can only give to 501c3 holding organizations as recognized by the IRS. We can't give to a B Corp or anything that is a for-profit entity. I do recognize, however, that lots of social enterprises do have partnerships and deep roots and are doing great work within the Black community. So if you have a partnership with a Black-led nonprofit that you would be interested in applying for support for, I would suggest that you sign up for office hours and let's talk about it.
Next question. This person says they are Black and a woman, but they're asking, because my tenure is with Black entrepreneurs, my involvement is with owners. Can this grant be for this reason?
Can you read that again?
Yes. They have a tenure with Black entrepreneurs and their involvement is with owners, and they are wondering if a grant can be used for this purpose.
If you are a Black woman that is running a nonprofit that works with this segment, yes. And we do know that there are a number of nonprofits that are specifically working to support for-profit business owners, and that would be acceptable, yes.
Um, so another question is, what is the total amount you're looking to award for this first round?
We haven't set a firm limit. The fund has more than $4 million in it at this point, which is truly exciting. We're trying to see how much we get in. Sometimes when we have new grant opportunities, we don't get as many applications as we might expect in the first round because people have to think about what it is that they need. So we don't know, but this round of grant making will help us to set the pace for the next round of grant making later this year and subsequent rounds. But look out for more information about, our plans on that matter.
Another question is, for organizations that require a fiscal agent, does the leadership of the fiscal agent have to be Black as well?
Because the fiscal agent is literally just handling the money for the Black nonprofit. I think we might be able to be flexible on that. It would be really great if there were partnerships between, say, Black nonprofits, Black-led nonprofits, and new organizations that are seeking a fiscal agent. Again, I think this is an opportunity for you to sign up for an office hours to talk about your particular relationship. But when it comes to a fiscal agent, the organization that we are supporting is the sponsored organization, not necessarily the agent.
Will you be supporting organizations of all sizes, or are you focusing on smaller grassroots agencies?
We are open to organizations of all sizes.
And I guess just to reiterate, the questions about, do you have to have a 501c3? What if
Yeah.
you don't have one?
Fiscal agency is your road. And if it's difficult for you to get a fiscal agency going right now, begin investigating that for the next round of grant making.
Are school districts eligible, or only 501c3 organizations?
501c3 organizations.
Do you have an idea when the second round of funding will be?
It will open sometime in late summer so that we can get it up and running by fall.
Will there be a way to add work you have worked on or are already currently working on that makes the most compelling effort, or why we are requesting funding?
Put that into the anything else box. That's why it's there.
Is there a benefit for similar organizations to complete a joint application?
If you wanted to, sure. I mean, we are open to partnerships. Partnerships can be really, really fruitful.
Mm. How would you, how would we note that we have a fiscal sponsor?
Okay, that's a great question. So when you have a fiscal sponsor, the fiscal agent is the one that has to submit the request. The narrative questions, however, should delineate that it's a fiscally sponsored application on behalf of X, and then all the questions should be answered from the perspective of the sponsored organization, the organization without 501c3, as opposed to the organization that is simply submitting the application and will be the fiduciary.
Okay, sorry, I'm just moving through some of these questions. Since we have a little time.
We do.
Um, as far as capacity building, staffing needs, would the proposed funding be able to be applied towards any staff from CEO to administration assistant to seasonal interns as well?
Yes, as long as you make the case for what it's necessary for your organizational capacity.
What is the grant funding term?
1 year.
Okay. Um, so there's a lot of technical questions, and I would also I'm kind of skipping a lot of them, but I would say that a lot of the answers can be asked if we miss some of these questions and
Sure.
we don't answer them today.
And there will be guidance, there will be a walkthrough on the website. These slides will go up, this video will go up with more technical information.
Okay, so are there red flags that might indicate an organization is not ready for a grant opportunity?
That's a really good question. So part of the purpose of doing this is for organizations to identify what it is that they will need in order to get ready to move to the next level. I would say that if you're really not sure, if you're kind of chasing, you're still trying to evaluate what your mission needs to be, what your work should be. If you are still kind of trying to nail down how do you do an organization budget, this grant opportunity can help you to get assistance with that. But if you are still in search of your mission and how you fit into it, you're not probably ready yet. A lot of times, however, organizations undersell, don't understand how very ready they are. My suggestion is to not count yourself out from submitting a proposal so that we can review it. One of the purposes of this fund is to not just give you a check and expect that you will go and sort it out on your own and then come back and it's a gotcha whether or not you were able to figure it out. We want to bring organizations together. Perhaps we can facilitate a cohort of learning or coaching and assistance to help get organizations in stronger shape. Um, we don't expect that everybody will come into this opportunity knowing how to run an organization, and this is a learning opportunity. But I can say the Cleveland Foundation has in the past taken bets on people and organizations with vision who needed that assistance. And many of them have been Black leaders, and those bets have paid off wonderfully for the community. And we're willing to take such bets now.
Next question is, okay, so if your organization is part of a national network, which organization leader is considered? The National Executive Director or the Cleveland Executive Director? Which one is considered?
I guess this depends on whether or not you are just a satellite chapter of a larger organization and they retain the 501c3 and everything goes through that organization, or if you are a satellite chapter, but you have your own 501c3 and you set your own agenda. I don't know that I could give a blanket answer to that. That sounds like in specific instances, shoot us an email at Cleveland Black Futures Fund at clevefdn.org so that we can sort that out.
So next is, should the budget reflect an annualized operational budget if for operation, or should it be constructed like a program project budget over a term of year?
We are looking specifically to see your organizational over a term of a year sort of budget, as opposed to we're trying to move away from the project basis. So if it were like for staffing, let's annualize that. Let's see what that is on an annualized basis, please.
The next one is, if you've been doing the work in the community for several years and just recently received 501c3 status, would that be considered a when-determined grant award?
Yes. Put that into your questions that you've been doing this work in your anything else that you need to tell us box. Explain that to us.
Next question is, would you recommend a grant writer to write this grant?
Like a specific grant writer. We don't recommend specific grant writers. Do I think that you necessarily need a grant writer? Our goal in creating a direct and unique application would be that it would be accessible without a grant writer. It's not a test, and it's not a contest about who has the best grant writer. So don't worry too much about style, worry about giving us complete answers. And if you can do that without somebody who necessarily has training in writing grants, go ahead and submit it on your own. But it doesn't hurt to have grant writing assistance, totally up to you.
Can we apply for our own grant and also be a fiscal agent for someone else?
We have been able to support that in other grant making opportunities at the Cleveland Foundation, such as the Minority Arts and Education Fund. The only thing I would say about that is that make sure that you have the financial capacity to do both, because being the fiduciary on behalf of somebody else's grant and also managing your own, that can take a lot of work.
Mhm. Do you consider funding currently existing positions that are not currently fully funded?
If that is a capacity need and priority for your organization, yes.
When will the second grant cycle begin?
Again, late summer.
How do these grants relate to community organizing?
Community organizing is welcome to apply.
Hi, so we have a Black-led organization. However, we serve entire LGBTQ community with focus on intersectional identities, which impact the lives of BIPOC folks in our community. Would we be eligible?
Yes.
Will newly formed nonprofits be given serious consideration?
Yes.
What information is to be provided in the application to show the demographics of the organizational leadership?
You will be self-reporting, and we are going to ask you to be honest about self-reporting.
Can you apply in the next round if you don't get in on the first round?
Yes.
If you have a 501c3, but you are a private foundation, are you able to apply? Do you have to be recognized as a 501c3 public charity?
As in, are you a grant-making foundation, 501c3? The Cleveland Foundation, I believe, has some restrictions about certain contributions for other grant-making. I think this is a case where you should at least send an email to Cleveland Black Futures Fund at clevefdn.org so that we can look at the particulars.
Mhm. Are churches able to apply?
501c3 holding organizations, and some churches, I believe, do have 501c3 or status and are doing certain work, so would be eligible.
Mm. Can we include those needs that reflect the changes with COVID-19, such as food, mask, and items outside of our mission statement?
Yes.
Are beds considered capital expense?
So I think a capital expense, when it comes down to a nitty gritty of a bed, depends on what your organization's policy is in terms of capitalizing certain expenses. I don't know if you capitalize that as an expense in your books, but if beds are going to be important to your continued and expanded capacity, then you should apply for that.
If my proposal wasn't funded for another fund, um, can you call, will that be a reason for unsuccessful proposal count towards applying for a Black Futures Fund?
No. Our grant opportunities don't compete with each other. So this is a discrete application that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with any other application you have submitted to the Cleveland Foundation.
Okay. Um, um, what status as a business is needed for an organization to use a fiscal agent?
I'm not sure that I understand in terms of status. Um, I'm going to take a stab and guess that if you don't have a 501c3, that you are a collective. And collectives can take lots of forms. So that is a question that I think comes down to the individual applying organization. Again, office hours or send an email.
Okay, so this one, can a 501c3 have multiple applications, one or just one for a nonprofit or one as a fiscal sponsor?
I think we did talk about that. We at the Cleveland Foundation have in the past in grant opportunities been able to give an award to an organization for themselves and an award for a fiscally sponsored project. Again, it depends on your capacity to manage such and keep them separate and keep the books and that sort of thing. I do want to note that when it comes to fiscal agency, we want the funding to go to the fiscally sponsored project. And so if you are able to do that and you have the capacity to do that, yes, you could apply.
Mhm. Does this grant require cash or in-kind match?
No.
What if the leadership is Black and the organization has typically served whites and is striving to serve the Black community under the leadership of a Black executive director?
I think that there is great value in Black leadership and perhaps historically non-Black organizations that are taking these organizations into new areas. Um, I would suggest let's talk about what your proposal is. So office hours.
Does a nonprofit have to be in Cleveland?
Yes. I mean, maybe not within the city of Cleveland. This is an opportunity for the 3-county radius that the Cleveland Foundation serves, so Cuyahoga, Lake, and Geauga.
If you're just starting your small organization and plan on using another 501c3 to file on your behalf, do you have to have a previous financial record or audit information?
If you do have it, it is useful for you to be able to provide it. If you don't have it, um, just talk to us about what you have been doing in your proposal, so that we can get some sense of what you have been doing, if anything at all.
Are organizations that are 501(c)(3) but only have an advisory, not governing board eligible to apply?
You need to have a governing board, I'm pretty sure, to be a 501(c)(3) organization. Um, if you don't have an advisory, if you don't have a governing board, that is a pretty serious impediment. I will say that this grant can be utilized to help expand boards, train boards, things of that nature. But it is necessary to have a governing board to have a 501(c)(3) in good standing, I'm pretty sure.
Okay. So I think we have 5 minutes left. So I think one good question is just to talk about the Black Future Fund's priorities.
Yeah. So the request for proposals is framed in the COVID-19 crisis context because it's not going away. In a lot of ways, it's getting worse. And in a lot of ways, we're only just beginning to understand what it's going to take for us to recover from that crisis, on top of everything else that we've already been fighting. That is not meant to limit or constrain the applications that we will accept to only say health and human services organizations, because again, um, all organizations of all stripes in all sectors have been pulling together to help the community through this. And we're asking you to reflect on that. Um, I want to make it very clear that we are about social change to create a better future for the Black community. And social change occurs in every single sector. So, talk about what those changes are. I believe that this fund is a part of social change, in that it is expressly putting resources into the hands of Black-led organizations, and that is the way that philanthropy can engage in this kind of change specifically. And I have been in conversation with a number of funds that are similar, that have started across the country in the last year, that have this same interest, and that is a change. Um, I don't know what the answers are that people need to be doing in certain sectors in order to make change. But every single day, I am inspired by the people who I do talk to who do have a pretty clear vision about that. And so I would say our priority is learning who's got that vision and how we can support. So it seems that that may be our final question. I will just reiterate that a recording of this webinar will be posted so that you can revisit it. The slides will be as well. The RFP is up on the Cleveland Foundation website. You can still sign up for virtual office hours. If you have questions about your qualifications or this fund, please email Cleveland Black Futures Fund at clevefdn.org. And if you have technical questions about access to the portal, that is a question for grants management specifically. But if nothing else, I really look forward to getting all of the proposals and to talking to organizations in the next couple of weeks. So thank you for joining us today.